Paul.
Hello, Rachel. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yes, we're talking about Sondheim today.
Mm.
I'll just jump right in. So, wondering if you could speak to this idea of tunefulness and accessibility that I find comes up sometimes when we talk about Sondheim. So, do you think Sondheim's work challenges or plays with this idea of like success and meaningful impact for a musical, even if some might say it's not like a tune you can hum?
Well, I believe I believe that Sondheim does write hummable tunes. So I don't subscribe to that notion that his tunes are unhummable. I think part of it is that in the golden age of musicals, songs for musical theater were also the popular songs of the day, or some of the popular songs of the day. Famous artists would cover their songs, and they would get radio play. And so people think of those songs as more hummable because there was simply more exposure to them. Mm-hmm. A good example with Sondheim is "Send in the Clowns," which I think most people would say, "Oh, well, that's a hummable Sondheim song." Right. And I think that's because it did get covered by Judy Collins, and it did become a radio hit, and people were exposed to it time and time again. And I think that the same thing would happen if other Sondheim songs became hits. People would find them hummable. I think the only thing that maybe would make people sometimes think that his tunes aren't hummable, or might detract from the hummability of the tune, is sometimes his unusual harmonizations. You know, like you could play a Sondheim melody and you have certain chords in your head. They would probably be simpler chords, and then when you hear the chords the Sondheim has used, that might make it seem less hummable, but it's actually just, you know, interesting composition. And I think he's using those chords because he's always going after something. There's always a point to it. And I think it usually has to do with the psychology or the spirit of the character at any given moment.
Content dictates form. Love it. So what do you think it is about Sondheim's musicals that make him and them, the musicals, so essential to the canon?
It's just great writing. Like, he's just a master craftsman, and he took musical theater composition and lyric writing to the next level. He really did. So it's just the excellence. I know that's kind of a simple answer, but I really think it just comes down to that, the level of craftsmanship.
Yeah. Can you think of, like when you say excellence, does an example come immediately to mind, or like, do you hear something that makes you say that?
Sure. A couple that come to mind are Moments in the Woods from Into the Woods, as well as On the Steps of the Palace from Into the Woods. So in both cases, you get these women at very particular moments in their lives, in very particular situations, and I just think his exploration of those characters and what they're going through, both lyrically and then how the music supports the lyric, it's just, it's like breathtakingly good writing and well observed psychologically.
Yes, yeah. So we're working on Gypsy.
We are.
Of course, yes.
Remotely these days.
Remotely, yes. Via the internet. So what do you think it is about Gypsy that makes people associate it so closely with Sondheim, even though he, of course, did not write the music? He only wrote the lyrics.
I think it's because it's something I mentioned about Sondheim just a minute ago, but I think he's a real keen observer of the human condition and of psychology. Many people say Sondheim brought a sense of psychology to musical theater writing, a sense of what's going on inside of us and how there can be conflicting and complex things inside of us. because we tend to associate that with Sondheim, I think Gypsy is a story that is chock full of psychologically interesting characters. And so I think with someone like Mama Rose and all that's going on inside of her, it feels very Sondheim. So with Rose's Turn, which is Rose's final song in Gypsy, that's a song that came about because Sondheim and Jerome Robbins got together trying to figure out what Rose's last song should be, what it should be about. And they really explored it and kind of thrashed it out, figured it out. And they used songs and themes from the show, but strung them together and really created something that was completely new. And so even though the tunes are Julie Stein, the construction of this magnificent number is pure Sondheim, because he was the one responsible for what sections of songs we should use where and how the whole thing proceeds, and has amazing psychological truth and a sense of excavating what's going on inside this woman.
That's great. Love that word. So there are 2 Sondheim musicals on the season this year, in the season. Gypsy, of course, and Assassins that will start soon. And several other Sondheim musicals have been produced here in the past that you have worked on.
That's true. We've done a lot of Sondheim here.
We've done a lot of Sondheim, yeah. So what do you think it is about Sondheim's like material and everything we've talked about that aligns itself so well with the Shaw Festival?
I think actors love digging into Sondheim because it's so actable. It's also very singable. And so if you are an actor with a thrilling singing voice, you will be able to bring that to the Sondheim songs. And you can also really dig into the acting of the songs as well. And I think that's why actors in general love doing Sondheim, but particularly at a place like the Shaw Festival, where we value the acting so highly in everything we do. I think there's a real sense of Sondheim as a joy to dig into because it is so complex and actable.
That's great. Well, one last one before we wrap up. What's your favorite? I should say we've been saying Sondheim a lot, and his name is Stephen Sondheim, in case anyone didn't know. First name Stephen. But yeah, what's your favorite one? The one you enjoy the most?
It's hard to say because I love so many of them. But I would have to say probably Sunday in the Park with George is my favorite. I love musicals that transport one, whether you're watching it or listening to it or engaged in the performance of it. And I find Sunday in the Park with George a real transformative piece for everyone involved. And so there's just something about that show that lives a little bit higher than his other musicals for me. How about you?
I think my favorite is Into the Woods. We did it in high school, and so I had like an early exposure, and then I wrote about it a lot in university. So I think it just has an unfair advantage of that it has spent the most time in my brain, and I love all of them so dearly, but I think that's my favorite for that reason. Yeah. Well, this was so lovely. That's everything. I asked everything I wanted to ask. So
Good. You asked excellent questions.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye.
Thank you.